Hello and welcome to the Soul Sync podcast. I'm Jason Paul. Now, when I spoke to the guest that you're going to be hearing from today, I was blown away by her honesty, achievement and sense of service to that of the spirit world. Prepared to be captivated by the ethereal presence of a truly remarkable individual on today's episode of the Soul Sync. I'm honoured to welcome Jackie Wright, an internationally renowned medium, and she's also the distinguished president of the SNU, the Spirituous National Union. Jackie is also the esteemed chairman and a tutor at the prestigious Findlay College, which is the world's foremost college for the advancement of spiritualism and psychic sciences. Hailing from the northeast of England, Jackie's passion for serving the spirit world really does know no bounds. Whether she's imparting her profound wisdom in teaching, demonstrating her extraordinary abilities, or engaging in private sittings, Jackie brings a level of excellence and dedication that has earned her international acclaim. Jackie's connection with the spirit realm is not merely a learned skill, it's a gift passed down through generations. Inheriting her mediumistic ability from her paternal grandmother, who departed long before Jackie's arrival, adds a layer of ancestral mystique to her spiritual journey. While Jackie's home is in the industrial town of Middlesbrough, her influence and impact extend far beyond the UK. Her mediumship has graced audiences and clients worldwide, leaving an indelible mark on the hearts of those touched by her extraordinary abilities. Jackie's philosophy is just as profound as her mediumship. She says, retain your individuality, your uniqueness, because that is why the spirit world has chosen you. As we invite Jackie onto the Soul Sync podcast, we embark on a journey guided by wisdom and insights of a true luminary in the world of spiritual exploration. So get ready to be enchanted, inspired and enlightened as Jackie Wright shares her extraordinary experiences, teachings and a glimpse into the realms where the tangible and the mystical converge. This is going to be an episode you won't want to miss. Jackie's an excellent teacher and I loved every moment of the conversation. I hope you enjoy. So Jackie, thank you so much. I'm so honoured for you being the inaugural guest on this podcast. Thanks for joining us on Soul Sync.
My pleasure. I'm excited about being here.
Now, in the intro, people have heard a lot about you and sort of what you're all about. But to people that don't necessarily know you or haven't come across you before, can you tell us kind of about your journey into becoming a medium? And just walk us through, because you've got a really interesting backstory. And obviously, I've read your book. It's a short book, but it's a really insightful book. So I'm familiar with your background. But tell us about you to people who don't know you.
I love how you said interesting. I would use the word gory, but there you go. It's a difference in perception. So I come from a town in the northeast of England called Middlesbrough. I was raised in a very dysfunctional and religious family. Childhood was very stressful and there was lots of different levels of abuse within that. My father passed away when I was 6 and my mum passed away about 10 years later. I had a mum who didn't cope with being a mother very well. So there was a lot of mental and emotional abuse because of that. And I was always expected, my granddad said, my maternal granddad, that I would become a nun. I'm sure that when he passed away, the Pope breathed a sigh of relief, she's not coming, guys, we're okay. So at the age of 16 and a half, I married. I was already pregnant. I lost my mum in the March, fell pregnant in the April and got married in the July. It was an eventful year.
It was indeed.
It was, but I had a lot of pressure on my shoulders and fear played a big part. Up to this point, I had no idea about mediumship, no idea about spiritualism and no clue what any of it meant. It was many years later, when my youngest sister, who was only 13 when Mum died, and she said to me, "Where do you think Mum is?" And my reply was, "Hell." And she said, well, I was still a Christian, so it was heaven or hell. She could only be in one or two places. So she said, "Shall we go to the spook church to find out?" Which is a term for spiritualist church. I was aghast. "No," I said, "can't do that. No, absolutely not, you know." And she said, "Please, please." Anyway, she begged and she pleaded. And I said, "Okay, I'll meet you there." And we arranged to meet outside Middlesbrough Spiritualist Church at 7 p.m. when the service would be starting. My sister never turned up. I went into the church, sat there in a packed church. There wasn't a seat left in the house. She still didn't turn up. And I got a message from the medium saying, "You know, I've got your father here." She gave me a lot of evidence from my dad. And she said, "One day you will stand here where I stand." At that, I called her an idiot and demanded to be let out. But you know, after that, it was, who's told her all this about my dad? Somebody must have fed her information. Who could have told her? I honestly thought I would walk through them doors and see human sacrifices on the altar and things like this. Yeah, I was clueless. But after that, I was smitten. I wanted to know more. I wanted to have questions answered. I didn't really go back to Middlesbrough Church. I went back because there is two different types. There is Christian Spiritualist Church and there is Union Spiritualist Church. Middlesbrough Church is a Union church, and I decided to go to the Christian Spiritualist Church because I was more au fait with the hymns and the prayers and the artifacts and all of this.
You mentioned that in your book about the kind of distinction between your very religious upbringing and how that really kind of played a role in those early days of you trying to understand mediumship. And it one thing that really kind of shone out to me was how your religious upbringing really kind of put fear into you about evil spirits, the devil. And one thing I really noticed as I went through your book about those early days of mediumship was your experience of first going into the circle. I was reading it and it made me laugh. It shouldn't have made me laugh, but it really did. Tell us about that, because I think a lot of people, I've been to a circle and I've got my own experiences, but tell us about those early days, because I think a lot of people will get a lot of value from that, because I imagine some people have had very similar experiences.
And I think it showed me the distinction between somebody being a good medium, but not necessarily a good teacher. I went along, and I will say it again, so naive about mediumship. Asked could I join the circle, not knowing what that was. And the teacher said yes. But everything I did was wrong. Everything I said was wrong. And she made a big point of letting me know everything was wrong, which diminished my confidence big time. But one evening she said to me, "Come to the front and deliver a message." She said, "Turn your back first on the rest of the people." And I said, "Don't know how to do that." I said, "If I turn my back, how on earth do I give a message?" And she shook her head at me and she sighed deeply. And she said, "Jackie, it's always you. You're always the one asking a stupid question." She said, "You turn around, you throw your third eye over your head. You see who is behind you. You bring your third eye back and then you deliver the message." Well, as I say in my book, I kid you not, I spent weeks trying to perfect throwing my third eye over my head till somebody asked me, did I have Tourette's? So I was going around doing this constantly. And, other things. There was a big, and it's something I'm very vocal about in today's world, there was a big thing then about fear of spirit. Fear of evil spirits, of dark spirits, of attachments. And I always joke though it isn't funny, about how I became a divorced lady. And I talk about my then husband coming into the church to pick me up because I couldn't drive at that time. And the teacher asking him, was he okay? And he said, I'm tired. She said, oh, no. You've got the spirit of a man stuck in your auric field. Come and sit down. And then she proceeded to very dramatically draw this poor spirit of a man that had the misfortune to be trapped in my husband's auric field, to draw him out and to set him back to the light. She then proceeded to stitch up the hole in the auric field that this poor man had left. And I laugh about it and I say it in a way that is funny. What people don't realise is that because of the fear that put into my then husband, who did he take that out on when we got home?
Yeah, exactly.
There has to be an outlet for that fear. So it was me who got the brunt of that in a violent way. And I think we forget that when we are trying to portray things as supernatural or fearful, somebody's got to find an outlet for that fear. And it's not always pretty. You know?
I can imagine. It's what made, because you sat in this circle for a very long time trying to develop your medium skills to not much avail. There wasn't much teaching. Every time there was a question, it was just, you accept this. This is how it is. This is what the teacher said. Accept this. What made you kept going back? What was it about it that kept pulling you back to this circle?
Two things. Practically, it got me a night out of the home. Secondly, I needed still to find the answer to who had given the information about my dad. I was still curious as how could a man who had been dead for all these years suddenly talk to another living person and give so much information.
When did you finally find the answer to that?
Well, now, yes, but not through that circle.
Right.
Yes, now, but not then. And I think also what I was searching for is the more I questioned, the more I realised there'd been things in my childhood that I hadn't put down to mediumship. I just put them down to being a traumatised little girl. And then I started thinking, well, okay, maybe, just maybe. And, you know, the jigsaw started to fit together. What I realised from that circle had nothing to do with mediumship. I realised that everybody who goes to these circles is broken in some way. And because they are broken in some way, they're easily manipulated.
I was going to ask you this question later on in the episode, but you've kind of touched on something now. People who have a desire or some kind of pulling of the soul to want to be a medium, is there normally, it seems to me, that there's a common thread for that person has been through a very hard time or suffered deep trauma? Do you agree with that? And if so, why do you feel that is?
Oh, definitely, I agree with that. And I don't know if you've ever, I seen it once on Facebook and it did make me smile. And there was a picture of a lady sitting cross-legged in the lotus position. And it said, achieving what that you hope spirituality looks like. And then the next picture is somebody with pulling their hair out and looking like a scene from The Exorcist, what spirituality really is. Because I do believe that the awakening happens when we've been through the dark night of the soul, as we call it, where when we're faced with such heartache, whatever that is, and it'll be different for everybody, that there is an awakening of the soul, that the soul tries to show you you're stronger than you think. And that opens the door. You know, I think, anyway.
So I know there's a lot of information online, but how would you describe the dark night of the soul?
Whenever there is a trauma, so for some, it could be losing a parent or a loved one in traumatic senses. It could be my childhood. There was a lot of death from a very young age, but a lot of abuse too that followed that. It could be a financial trauma where you've suddenly lost everything materially, your work, your home, your marriage, all of this. It could be any of them. But it is when you are so far in the ground that you don't feel you'll ever stand up again. And then suddenly this strength comes.
I can relate to that. Obviously, we're only on the first episode, but I think it feels like to me I've had 3 concurrent Dark Night of the Souls back to back, which sort of led me to this place, but we'll get into that another time. So you went to the circle, and one thing that I took from your story was after Findlay, that is when it suddenly picked up pace. I spoke about Arthur Findlay briefly in the intro to this episode, but pick up the story from there, Jackie, because I think that's where things really started to me. It seemed like things went full throttle from that sort of moment.
I was in church and I seen on the notice board an advert for this college. No idea what it was, the Arthur Findlay College. And when I looked at the inside of it, it had all these courses. So I asked my husband, would he allow me to go? And he said, if you can afford to. So I borrowed the money from my uncle because I just didn't have any money. And I booked a course that was hypnosis and mediumship. No idea what either of them were. I'll do that. It's a weekend. I can afford a weekend. I'll go. I turned up late at night because I'd got lost. And there was this most beautiful building, Victorian building, rising up in the clouds with the moon behind it. And it was just awe-inspiring. It took my breath away. When I got inside, I was told I no longer had to share a bedroom, which was a bonus because the other person couldn't make it. So I had a room to myself. But it was a weekend of heartache, first of all, but also, again, another step on that road to awakening. Because, I think there is something to be said that when you have got so much trauma within you, other people sense that, and so they exploit it. And I found that on that weekend, it was exploited in not the best ways. But I went back. I'm a glutton for punishment. And I met a teacher the second time I went called Glyn Edwards. He's now passed away. And he was the teacher who put me on the right road. He explained things in common sense. He told me things in a very simplistic way, which for somebody who had never been to school helps a lot because I never got the opportunity of schooling. And everything just started to come together then. From that, I started to read a lot more on things. And the Spiritualist National Union runs courses for awards. So you do remote teaching and learning. And I started to do the correspondence courses and did every single one they had because I was trying to prove something to somebody, somewhere, somehow. And that was the beginning of that, and it just snowballed from there. But I have to say, as a student, the college can be a magical place. But once again, it attracts a lot of broken people. So you've got to be aware of that. And I wasn't strong enough to deal with that at that time,
I think, I guess it goes back to trauma, the dark night of the soul, and people arriving on the doorsteps of the college. I've been to the college and it had a profound effect on me. And, we could do a whole episode just talking about the college, but I'm sure if you haven't heard of it, definitely do check it out. There's lots of good online courses as well. So we went from that place, and then you've obviously developed over the years. And I want to try to get to sort of the current day and how you went from that place to now being the president of the SNU and now the chairman of the college. We've suddenly done a massive jump here to your first time, going to the college. And arriving there, you said about your schooling, your background, it really was against all odds, it seems like. If you start at the beginning of the book and didn't know anything about you, I wouldn't have believed it when I got to the end. So walk us through that. I know it's a very long time period, and just tell us how you've got to that place. And then I want to come on to mediumship, because I'm sure there's so many things we can cover that are really going to help either people who are already doing mediumship or whatnot. So talk to us about that, some of the highlights throughout your career and how you've got to this place where you are now, which is incredible.
I have no idea. But one thing, when I was at the college, as you will know, they do sit-ins called assessments, where they tell you how you're developing and what your potential is. Mm-hmm. And the person who did that for me said, you'll never be a medium and you'll never be a teacher. And I drove home 4 hours crying. And my son, who was 16 at the time, and he said to me, you've got a choice, Mum. You prove them right or you prove them wrong. What are you going to do? And that fired me up. So that's why I kept going. If I'm nothing else, I'm very stubborn. As I did all the courses and started to do the awards, I was invited to be chairman of the education committee. Now, just think for a moment of the irony of that. Never been to school, never been to college, never been to university. Jackie be the chairman of the education committee. And I did that for a few years. I was then voted, because it's an election process, to go on to the National Executive Committee. Before that, sorry, I'm getting ahead. I became a tutor at the college. Mm-hmm. Even though I was told I was not good enough, I still became a tutor at the college. And then I got elected to be a vice president. Now, maybe because of my childhood, Jason, I don't know, but the whole religious aspect of spiritualism is everything to me. It is my life. My churches are what my heart beats for. Mm-hmm. And I didn't like the way the churches were being treated. So I got the opportunity to stand against the then president of the union, and I won the election. Suddenly, this little girl from a little industrial town who'd been kicked from pillar to post, who'd never got to school, was suddenly in charge of a multi-million-dollar charity, 300 churches, 2,000 members, and I was the one having to oversee all of that, including the Arthur Findlay College, because you become chairman of that when you become president, and also of the Barbanell Centre in Stafford, which is the sister teaching place. And that's, in a nutshell, a very short nutshell, how it happened. But I do want to say this, if I'm honest, in a way, it was me kickback to the way people were treating me. Because it almost forced me to show them that you can't treat people this way. You know, I mean, I wasn't treated well on the NEC when I became a VP, a vice president. But then you see, I was the runt of the litter. So that therefore I was right to be kicked. The same at the college. And that's why I believe when you give out this energy of the victim, that's how people treat you, you know. So I give them permission to treat me that way.
I think there's a lot of truth in that. It's just an incredible story. What is your vision for the future of the SNU? What do you want to achieve in your time as president?
Well, I have less than 12 months left, and I might get voted back in, I might not. But my vision is very simple: to make our religion the greatest religion that it was meant to be. It was always meant to be a religion that transformed the face of religions. That's what our pioneers wanted. It was never meant to be a religion that dictated or tied you to a doctrine. It was a religion of freedom, freedom to think, freedom to explore. And people get very confused because they'll say, oh, you're a spiritualist. Can you do me a reading? Well, that's a little bit like saying to a Catholic, can you do mass? Because spiritualism is the religion. Mediumship is a faculty within that. Doesn't mean to say because you're a medium, you're a spiritualist or spiritual. Because I see mediumship as just as a faculty, like being able to sing or play football or whatever.
Do you think that in terms of spirituality and the SNU, my experience of going to churches sometimes is the demographic seems to be more senior than younger. But is that something to do with the very essence of one's soul and having to go through something before arriving? What's your view on that?
Two things. First of all, in general, not a blanket statement, but in general, people find spiritualism when they've suffered a loss.
Right.
That is usually people middle-aged and above rather than younger, usually. Secondly, I love our churches, but they're not always the most inviting places for younger people to come into. And I think we've got to a point in the pathway where we've got to stop and ask ourselves, what can we offer the young people today? Now, I think there's a lot we can offer young people, but we have this issue of being stuck with a message from Granny. And
Okay.
we are more than that. We are deeper than that. And when our biggest pandemic at the moment is mental health, we have some answers for that. Come in, do questions and answers. Let's chat. Let's do a meditation that doesn't involve connecting to Granny, So there is so much we can offer, but we have to first come out of our comfort zone and stop waiting for people to find us.
I think that's so true, actually, because if I'd arrived at a church maybe years before and it had more of that theme, maybe I would have been more enticed in. But the only thing that was luring me in was the chance of someone coming through. And obviously there's only a few selected people in a Sunday service. I want to ask you some questions, which I'm sure a lot of people who've arrived at this podcast are probably wondering. How do I know what my soul's journey is? How do I know if I'm on the path that I should be on? And I'm asking this of all the listeners as well, and myself, Jackie. I'm not going to say I'm not curious to hear from you about this point.
So I don't think we know what our soul's path is. I don't believe we know what that agreement is in our physical form. But I do believe that if we don't fight it, the soul will lead us to where that path should be. So, for example, I know I keep saying this, but this little girl, meant to be a nun, brought up in very Catholic doctrine, married at 16, wasn't a great deal open to me, But because I followed the doors as they opened and I didn't fight against that, then I followed my soul's path. And I feel what we do is, instead of doing that, we listen to what other people want us to do. I have a lot of brothers and they say to me, why are you bothering with a religion that only talks about death? Does it? So I am the black sheep of the family. But that's because I didn't conform. My soul took me a different way and I followed it. And I think that's the biggest thing I can say to anybody. If you've got this urge within you to just give something a try, do it. And your soul will soon tell you if it's right or if it's not.
I guess it goes back to listening to one's intuition and gut feeling. And I remember many times throughout my life where I've known what the answer was, but I've chosen to consciously go against it. So I guess it goes kind of back to that.
It does. But the other thing is as well, if I can say, people have a tendency to do what they think other people will approve of. That doesn't necessarily mean you're doing what's right for you. You know, you sometimes got to take a step back and just feel that. What is it that's right for me? And then let the soul open another door.
What would you... Obviously, you feel a deep connection to the universe, I'm guessing. Well, you must do. How does one get a deeper connection to the universe, would you say?
I've always had that. And this is one of the things I realised that happened as a little girl that I didn't know was part of that. I'm not very good at being sociable. I like to be alone. And in that alone time, I like to observe and I like to ponder life. And I think that's how our curiosity begins, when suddenly the nightlife isn't a big deal, but wanting to watch the night sky is. And because I was aware of a God that was vengeful and scary and was going to judge me, I wanted to know whether that was true. So spiritualism took me away from the fearful God and told me about the universal God, you know, the God that is in everyone and everything and nature, even in my worst enemy, which I struggled with for a while, you know. But so for me, it's about being still, being observant, and just listening to the feelings and reacting to the feelings that situations give to me.
I totally agree with that. I think it's you need to stop and observe. And I think we live in such a world that is we're getting more and more and more disconnected to nature. And I'm actually genuinely scared about the direction that this world is going in. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing spiritualism and mediumship as we are catapulting into a world now where you don't know whether you're dealing with a robot, a person? What do you think we can do to save society? Or am I asking a much too wide a question?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to ask you for the fix to all world problems, Jackie, but do you have any views on that?
You know, we have, especially since the pandemic as well, we have a very different life to what we used to have. Now, I'm a grandmother of a 16-year-old granddaughter, and her biggest fear in life is that she won't be invited into Love Island, you know, and she spends all the time glued to the phone, and I'm asking her questions, and she's, you know, she's a typical teenager. But I worry about where is life going to take her because of social media, because of the internet, because of everything being virtual. And I do think that that's why there is an explosion of mental health issues, because people don't connect anymore. The soul isn't able to connect to another soul because of all of that. I still say spiritualism has a lot of the answers. And that is teaching us that we have answers within us. We don't need to take them from somebody else, that our soul can speak to us with a wisdom that no person can ever give to you. But I also feel that we have to encourage people to talk, to be there, to just, when I was a little girl, I'm going back a little bit now, my mum she had any issues, she'd run to the church and speak to the priest. You don't get that anymore because people don't want that kind of religion. And I feel that we've got to talk more about that universal God, the God that's within us, the spirituality and the connection to each other. Because what spiritualism teaches us is that underneath your body and underneath mine, we both have the same spirit and soul. And we are connected by that. And in the spirit world, I won't notice Jason, I will notice your energy and your spirit. And we've got to look deeper now, not just at that physical shell.
I totally agree. We're going to have budding mediums on different stages of their journey listening to this. What are the biggest lessons that you have learned as a medium to get to where you are?
Just remember, I'm radical. I don't always follow the norm. So
we know that, Jackie, but we love that and we embrace that with open arms.
Just stay this with
Okay.
No one teacher can teach you everything. And you will get teachers who will say to you, you've got to stay with me from A to Z. That is unhealthy. So I would say to any budding medium, experiment with different teachers and take the best from each teacher to make you the best you can be. Secondly, I'd say, don't have a fixed idea of what you want to be. Let the spirit world lead you into what they want you to be. I'd also say, don't mimic another medium, because the spirit world chose you to come on this pathway because of your uniqueness. So retain that. Don't mimic somebody else because they're on the TV or whatever. Okay. But also sit for spirit. Don't sit for a message. Don't sit for inspiration or anything. Just sit so they can learn to blend with you, not just you to blend with them, you know, because it's a partnership. It's a cooperation. And just giving them 10, 15 minutes a day where you can just let them draw close to you is such a gift in itself. And be true to you.
Thank you. I think that I found particularly along my journey that when I sit, and I'm getting better, much better at this these days, but I used to have an expectation. I'd sit and okay, something's going to happen. Okay, I'm waiting. And do you know what? It's funny that the lesson that I had to learn was to sit and do nothing. Surely that should be the easiest thing to think to anyone, shouldn't it? Just to sit and do nothing. But it took me a long time to get that kind of expectation piece out of my mind.
Yeah, because you've got a computer called a brain that is supreme. The computer is always in control. So the computer's never going to let you be still and quiet, you know? So you've got to find a way to distract it rather than stop it.
What are your top tips for someone really trying hard with meditation? Because there is so many different types, techniques, and I think it can be quite overwhelming when someone's trying to develop that. What would you say in that regard?
My first question would be why do you want to meditate? What is the reason? Mm-hmm. So meditation is good for if you've got any health issues or your mind is confused. It's good for you, okay? It's not good for mediumship. It'll teach you nothing within mediumship. So I would always tell people, and this is my mantra, meditate if you have a need, but ask yourself why. If there is no need and you think it's because it's something you have to do, then I would say sit in the power instead. Sit in that power of your auric field, strengthen it so that you have a strong vessel for that unseen world to blend with. That can be done walking, having your coffee, in the shower. It doesn't have to be in a meditative way. I am useless at meditation, but I can go out into the forest. I can sit with the spirit world and I can just push out that auric field and say, be with me and feel their closeness. And I think one of the things students need to remember, the spirit world isn't in another galaxy. The spirit world is around us. We are always in their presence. All we have to do is turn our attention towards them. But the vessel, the energy field, has to be prepared for that. And Franz Anton Mesmer taught us that in the 1500s. He taught us that the auric field was the vessel for all miracles.
Can you tell us more about the auric field? Because I think that in itself is a really pivotal part of mediumship from what I've learned. And there's going to be a lot of people listening to this perhaps on the start of their journey, and they're going to be saying, Jackie, tell us about an auric field. And please tell us about chakras, because I know myself, when I read your book, Jackie, I'm not going to lie, I thought chakras were quite important. And I got to page 12 of the book and realised that I've been wasting potentially a lot of time on chakras. So even myself will find that very useful. So tell us more about those two points.
Okay. So the auric field is an energy that surrounds every living thing. Okay. It is perceived by some with colours, and others just perceive it as energy. We do not know how many layers it has. It has a multitude of layers, but nobody's ever really come to a definitive answer. The Russians are the ones who have done the most research into the auric field and give us the most information. But with the work we do as psychics or as mediums, there are 4 layers that are very, very important, because the auric field will hold within it the sum total of our life's experiences, good, bad, or indifferent. The first layer, the physical layer, tells me all about Jason as a physical being. The second layer, the mental layer, tells me all about your mental health and how you learn, how you take in information. The third layer, your emotional layer. How do you give and receive love? How do you deal with emotions? And if I'm doing you a psychic sitting about you, they're the layers that will speak to me. The fourth layer, I just use very simple language. There's many, many different words, because as humans, we love words. But the fourth layer, the spiritual layer, has within it a natural magnetic power. And when that power is activated, that layer of the auric field has no restrictions on how far it can extend. And that layer is what becomes the delivery vehicle for the spirit people. So as you push out the auric field and you strengthen that, the spirit world can blend then so closely with you that you're in no doubt it's them.
So to an aspiring medium, the key here really is pushing one's auric field out, which activates the layer of the spiritual.
Not quite.
Oh, good.
So you've got to first activate the auric field, the magnetic layer. You've got to first activate that and then practice pushing it out. But it's no good pushing it out if you haven't got the strength in it to do that. And when you hear of people who have had burnouts, when they're therapists or whatever, it's usually because they have not developed that level of the auric field. So they draw on their own life force and they become burnt out and exhausted, etc., etc. But if you develop that layer, and the sexy word these days is sitting in the power, you can find hundreds of versions on YouTube. You really can. And I'd say practice with them to see which one suits you. Get that auric field as strong as you can. And that will make the difference between, I've got dad was a welder, dad died of cancer, to, I don't know if I've got mum or dad or the next door's cat, you know? So it gives you that ability to blend so closely, your information is exact and to the point.
That's really helpful. How would you say in the early days, I think a lot of things people come up against is it me? Is it my imagination? Or is it a spirit person?
And that's the lack of magnetic power in the auric field, because you haven't got the blend. So therefore you feel you're guessing the information. Until you develop that part of you where you can get the spirit world so tight that you know, then it doesn't matter. If somebody's saying to you, no, that information's wrong, you feel it so strongly, you know it's not wrong. And so therefore you can carry on with confidence.
So we go back to meditation, sitting in the power and expanding one's auric field.
Yeah, well, meditation, if that's what you feel. I'm not a lover of it.
It's not easy. It's taken me, I can say, a good part of a year to even be able to switch off the chatter of my brain. But
the other thing is, when you meditate within a group, I found this out very early. The teacher would go around and she'd say, "What did you get?" And they'd say, the next one, "What did you get?" "Well, I got a white horse." The third one, "What did you get?" "Well, I got a Native American sitting on a white horse." Then the fourth one, "What did you get?" "I got Big Chief Sitting Bull sitting on," and it got more and more exaggerated. So every person felt they had to get more than the last person. So it keeps you here. It doesn't, that's not, the real sense of meditation. So I'm not a big lover of it.
In terms of being a teacher at Arthur Findlay, you obviously have people that come to you from every corner of the globe. And I'm really not exaggerating about that. When I was at the college, I was in the minority, and most people were shocked that I just drove down the road to go there. What would you say you obviously see the real common threads of what people are struggling with? And what I'm kind of interested to know about is people who are maybe more intermediate or advanced. What are the blockages that people are coming across and the challenges that you see, those kind of common threads that students struggle with?
The biggest thing they struggle with is themselves. So the blocks are usually their own issues. And you may have heard me say this, but when I have students, I give them what I call tattoos, which are phrases I do not want them to forget. And one of the phrases I give, and it's a mantra that I repeat constantly, mediumship is a journey into the medium. I don't think the spirit world care two hoots whether we know there's life after death or not. We will all leave this world and find that truth for ourselves. But I do think that by us developing mediumship, we learn about us, who we are, not who our parents said we are, not who our teachers said we should be, but who we are at a soul level. And once we realize that, that's when we start to build a better world. I think that's their greatest reason for doing it. So the journey into mediumship for me isn't just about saying I've got mum or dad here. It's about me learning about myself. It's about me healing myself. It's about me asking myself the choices I'm making. What are the reasons I'm making them choices? And I believe that is people's biggest blocks, that they come in, I'm going to be a medium. They hold their mediumship away because they don't want to feel. Because if they feel, they'll realize they have pain that needs healing. So everything is kept outside of them. And that's their biggest challenge. Their next challenge comes down to where in the world they come from. We are very, very lucky in Great Britain. Spiritualism is a religion. Legally, we have churches that we can frequent whenever we want. With the exception of America, really, and Canada, nowhere else has that. Nowhere else has that freedom to go into a church and to sit with like-minded people. So I think we take it for granted. So other people are coming in and saying, I want to do this, but then they're going back to a very closed society where they can't be open about it. Thirdly, their motivation. We have an awful lot these days of careerists rather than spiritualists. I want to be a medium because I want to be on the telly or on the next podcast or whatever. And if that's your motivation, you're not going to get far.
No, because even in my journey of this, to constantly, this is what I've learned, and you can tell me, I'm sure that you, well, I'm not even going to say I'm sure you'll agree, Jackie. To constantly be in touch with myself and to constantly be in a state of feeling and to not do things to try and bring happiness in a way that might be material, things, or even sometimes a simple thing like having a glass of wine. I question, why am I having the glass of wine? What is it bringing to me in this moment? And you do have to reach deep inside. And that's a real level of vulnerability at times. And I've had to realize myself, to advance in my mediumship, I've had to become a lot more exposed. But what that's done at the same time is it's made me highly tuned and sensitive. So now some of the people of the past that I could tolerate, I'm really struggling to tolerate them now, Jackie. Is this to be expected in my development, would you say?
Yes.
Okay.
Because as you clear out from your vessel the past and the past conditioning, you'll find that people who once was part of your inner circle just naturally fall away.
Mm.
That your energy and theirs no longer attracts each other. And that is part and parcel of the growth and the unfoldment. And there's something else I say a lot to students. This path is a lonely path because as a seer, you can't walk it with anybody else. So you start to question, well, who does gel with me? Who does understand me? Who's going to accept me for me and not because I might be able to give them a message off granny, you know?
Mm.
So you become hyper alert and hypersensitive to that world around you and the people within it.
I know myself, I think that the last few years I found myself getting incredibly lonely because I found that I'm not feeling a connection to people. You know, I even recently, and I've been to, like, for instance, a sports club, and out of 70 people, I'm not really feeling a connection with anyone. And I'm sure there's lots of people listening to this now who have come across this podcast and they're feeling that incredible feeling of loneliness. Why is it I'm not gelling with anyone? Why is it that I'm not connecting with someone? What advice would you give to those people, Jackie?
Ride the storm. Because what you are learning is not to be attracted to people on a superficial level, but you're looking for that depth of connection. So therefore, there has to be an autumn where your soul clears out the old. There has to be the winter where we hibernate for a while, and then spring comes again. And that is when we start to see the new buds of people that are our soul group, if you will, you know, that resonate with us. But that group of people will always be very small. Okay? Because that's how it is.
Jackie, this has been a lovely episode. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but if people want to find out more about you or indeed the SNU or Arthur Findlay, where can they go to?
Well, they can go to the Spiritualist National Union website, so spiritualistnationalunion.org.uk. The Arthur Findlay College website, all very easily accessible, just type them in. So there is plenty of information out there, and they will also lead you to me.
And if you do want to read Jackie's book, I really would recommend it, especially if you're on the beginning of your journey. It does talk about meditation, all things. It is available on Amazon, Pathway to Mediumship. Jackie, thank you so much.
Can I just add to that?
Yes.
That little book is full of errors, and that was done deliberately. I wrote it as Jackie. I didn't have it edited or anything because I wanted people to know you don't have to be perfect to do this work. You just have to be you, and you is good enough.
What an absolutely lovely way, Jackie, to end the show. It's been an absolute delight, and I'm sure and I hope all of you got as much from that conversation as I did. That was the incredible Jackie Wright. Thank you so much for joining me on this enlightening episode of Soul Sync. If you have suggestions for future episodes or a guest you'd love to see featured, do drop me an email at hello@jasonpaulmedium.com. The email address is in the show notes. Your input is invaluable in shaping the soulful conversations we bring to you. For more spiritual insights, thoughts, book recommendations, and the latest updates about Soul Sync, do subscribe to my newsletter. Just go to jasonpaulmedium.com and just go straight to the bottom of the page. Sign up to stay connected with the soulful community we're building. In our next episode, get ready to dive into the extraordinary world of mediumship with none other than the luminary Paul Jacobs. His international acclaim and profound wisdom make this an episode again you won't want to miss. Paul Jacobs is not just an expert on the soul's journey, he's a living guide to the spirit world, offering insights that go beyond listening. This is an experience. I'm Jason Paul and you've been in the soul space. Until next time, goodbye.